That's all we ever thought about on Saturday night was Hialeah Speedway.
Larry, and thank you.
At 7 years old, I started going to the races. Now, I'm addicted.
The guys that built engines, that built cars, the guys that drove them were tough.
It was just a giant science project.
It's something I don't ever forget, and I hate that it's gone.
It's a guy thing. It's cars and speed.
I don't think that I ever had a fight with another driver. Well, that's not so.
It was pretty, calm till the feature came, and that's when things really heated up.
Beat and bang, and who would get the best of it was the bragging rights that night at dinner.
If you weren't at Hialeah Speedway on a Saturday night, you were missing out hugely.
There was something special about that place, and it'll never be replaced. Never.
Hialeah Speedway, the legendary South Florida racetrack, was more than just a place. It was a moment in time captured through the roar of the race cars on a Saturday night, like this one, on a track that was once considered one of the most challenging in the country. This is the story of Hialeah Speedway and the lives it touched for over 50 years. Hi, I'm Steve Brack. My father, Bobby Brack, is Hialeah Speedway's most winning driver in history, and I won a few races there myself. But what did it take for my dad to earn that honor? It was the same thing that it took for the Speedway itself to thrive. Determination, guts, and, oh yeah, drive. Our story begins back in the early 1950s, when an organization called the Greater Miami Racing Association decided to start a racetrack.
When the Greater Miami Racing Association guys got together, they did not want to be beholden to anybody. So they decided to get a piece of land, lease a piece of land, and build a speedway in 1953. And their main opposition, believe it or not, was NASCAR.
No stores, next to nothing out there. That's why they picked the land they did.
The Speedway was to be built in the middle of nowhere. Yep, Hialeah was once in the middle of nowhere. Well, there were cows.
You were driving to the end of the world to get to the place, and in the middle of these cow pastures, here was a speedway.
The Greater Miami Racing Association was a non-profit organization, and the drivers were all members.
And they were pretty big on not letting the quote-unquote inmates run the asylum, which is an old expression in racing. They really did the rules, dictated the rules. They had their board of directors.
The members donated their talents to get the speedway built. The drivers who were plumbers installed the bathrooms. The electricians hung the lights, and the carpenters built the grandstands.
Families would come out on Saturdays or Sundays like it was a big picnic, and they'd work around a racetrack, and that's how it ended up becoming a racetrack.
With a start like that, no wonder everyone felt like family. And sometimes we fought like family. But more about that later. Opening day, July 18th, 1954. A driver by the name of Herb Tillman won the first race.
It was a 34 Ford Coupe. They're getting scarce now, but that was the car that I run the opening day feature in.
Herb might not have known it yet, but he was at the start of something big, and Hialeah Speedway was about to get even bigger. After all, there wasn't much competition for the entertainment dollar back then.
We drank beer and we had pizza and we watched stock car racing. That was small town.
For a very long time, Hialeah Speedway was the place to be on a Saturday night.
I can remember in the 60s, women would go and get their hair done on Saturdays to come to the speedway with their hair all done up.
A lot of people did it from, all different walks of life. They weren't just so-called rednecks or, everybody went there.
All your sensories are on alert. I mean, the cars are fast from a visual standpoint. A lot of noise, screeching, tires spinning, roar of an engine. So your ears are all in tune, and at the same time, you know, there's a little drama. There might be a spin and another driver going and, you know, causing the event. So there's a quarrel after the race, and this was not the mundane. This was exciting stuff.
And at the center of it all were the guys who called the races.
Chip, what did you think of this day's racing?
Well, Chuck, it continues to prove itself as one of the best tracks in the nation, with the likes of Bobby Allison racing here, Red Farmer in years past, and once again today, a great afternoon of racing, and we've got some real stars of tomorrow out here today.
Legendary announcer Chip Green is largely credited for turning the racetrack into a show.
Every show has an opening and a closing. So I devised my opening and my closing for Hialeah Speedway. I'll give you my opening. And now, on a Saturday night, the Hialeah Speedway is proud to present the mighty late model modifieds. And everyone would scream.
I stole a bit from Chip Green at the end of the night, and when everything was all done, he'd say, "Ladies and gentlemen, good night. Do your speeding on the speedway, not on the highway." And that's how he would close that. And I stole that from him. I used to use it every Saturday night.
When Marty came back from the military, I trained him to be an announcer. The tricks of the trade, the nicknames.
All right, we got the one to go sign from the starter.
And there's the green flag down in the number 1 corner.
And we're should get a green this time. We're coming off of turn 4. Here we go. Green flag in the air. 8-lap heat race.
Somebody better put a red flag out. No, they've straightened it out. They're down toward number 3 now. And Brack takes the lead again. Brack holding on through the number 4 they come. And the first lap is over.
The announcers made that track. They were the tie-in to make that whole night enjoyable. He would give nicknames to the drivers. That stuck, and the crowd loved it.
Well, I'd learned a little trick when I did roller derby over at the Miami Beach Convention Center, and that was that every player had a nickname. And so I began my nickname calling. Noki Mallory, the man that had brought me to Hialeah because he smoked a lot, became Smokey Noki. Bobby Brack, who was considered the best driver at the track at the time, I named him the King. Everybody had a name. The fans loved it. Buddy Griffin was part of a huge family. There were Griffins everywhere. Buddy Griffin's nickname was Buddy Bud. Teddy LaFleur, a heck of a guy. My favorite driver was Billy Barnwell. His car was his name, the Flying Six of Billy Barnwell.
My dad, Bobby Brack, was always at the track, and as a little boy, I'd often tag along. In fact, the Speedway kept a lot of us kids out of trouble. George Poveromo was one of them.
He used to come by my house and stand out in front on the sidewalk looking at the race car. Sometimes it'd be all together and sometimes it'd be destroyed.
I was so totally hooked. This was the greatest thing in the entire world. I've not seen anything like that. It was just mesmerizing.
It did keep us out of trouble back then because we were so focused and competitive on our race cars. We literally had to work on them day and night.
When I started, I was in my teens. I was right out of high school, so my dad got me involved to keep me off the streets.
Some of the boys who wanted to race lied about their age.
I had some paperwork made that I made up myself so that no one else takes the blame for that, and saying I was 16.
These days in racing, it's in vogue to have the kids and teach them to be racers. Back then it wasn't.
But sometimes us kids would get in the way, and that would lead to some nicknames of our own.
Steve Dielman came to the Speedway as a little kid, and he had a little car, and he was a little pain. And the drivers said, "This new kid is just a pain." So I went up to Stephen Dielman and I said, "Steve, I'm going to name you because you're a pain." And that's why he was called Hemorrhoid.
That's true. I had a nickname for Hemorrhoid that went on and on and on forever and ever. And to this day, it sticks with me from time to time.
Growing up as a kid, I didn't even know his real name. For many, many years, I just knew him as Hemorrhoid. And he was the guy that you watched out for. You never turned your back on this guy.
Well, you have signs on your back, kick me or pinch me, or we put tape on the back of somebody, they walk around or make a tail and hook it to their pants. They walk through the pits like a donkey or something.
He always within some kind of controversy on and off the track.
But I defensed Ronnie. That's a good one. It was very exciting. Everybody got a good laugh.
But usually, the mischievous boys hanging around were the least of the driver's challenges. I mean, after all, there was the track.
The track.
Hialeah Speedway is a very unusual track. It's a 1/3 mile flat racetrack, and when I say flat, it may have a 1 foot, 2 foot bank in the turns. The straightaways are flat, and it was very, very hard for people to get their cars to handle properly on that.
You left there some days happy and some days mad.
I believe that Hialeah was one of the most challenging racetracks in the country.
But I can tell you one thing for darn sure. If you went strong at Hialeah, the race any place. You were definitely strong.
Winning strong at Hialeah meant keeping your car out of the 30-foot deep lake that once sat in the middle of the track. And back in the day, plenty of cars ended up in the drink. Did I just say drink?
I never verified the story that I heard one Saturday night was that we consumed more beer at the Hialeah Speedway than any other one location in Dade County.
Early on, it was nice and cold. As the evening went on, it might have gotten warmer because they couldn't get it cold fast enough.
And they parked the mud truck right out in the parking lot, a semi. And by the end of the night, it was empty.
They had popcorn there that was to die for. It was this buttery popcorn. It came in a bag and you would buy it and it had extra butter, and they put butter halfway through. So you take it back to your seat and there's butter dripping down out of the deal. They made these little cardboard pizzas that were just, you know, kind of a joke, but everybody wanted one.
Before becoming a driver, Ronnie Basello worked maintenance for a while.
The facility was such a mess, from all the beer cans and Coke cups and food trays and wrappers, that it took me actually 4 days to clean up the mess.
But anyway, let's get back to the real stars of the show, starting with the cars. They weren't like the race cars built today.
All the years that I raced, we were building our cars from scratch. We were taking old cars, taking them apart, gutting them, changing the motor, putting a roll bar in it and seats, and off we'd go.
Today's race cars are all made in the shop, like out of square tubing. You know, everything's made, no junkyard parts. Back in the day, you raced out of the junkyard. There wasn't no places to buy but some parts, like hubs, you know, but steering wheel maybe. Even seat belts, you used to go to old aircraft surplus places and buy them because there wasn't a place to buy them. And the body, everything was from the junkyard. You might mix like a Chevelle body on a 57 frame.
All the work was hands-on. I mean, you would see gas station stuff around, but the people would build these things themselves. It wasn't going and buying it. You had to literally figure out what to put together to make this thing run quick.
But we did one better than the junkyard. We lived in Fort Lauderdale, and they used to ship tons and tons of scrap metal to Japan. So what we would do is we would get up on the box cars that were filled with scrap metal and walk down the cars, and we would say, oh, there's a brake drum we can use, and throw it off to the side. And then we would walk back down the ties and then pile up all our parts. I know it's thievery, I'm sorry. I know we shouldn't have done it, might have even been a little dangerous, but that's what happened, and it was great.
We go up and down streets looking for old cars, the body styles like we use 57 Chevrolets, you know, maybe we could talk the people out of them.
Buddy Griffin still has the car he raced at Hialeah.
The car we have here has a 1957 chassis, a 1957 floor, and a 66 Chevelle body. We hand built the cars, they all spliced together. Check out the fiberglass seat. The seat's made of fiberglass. Today they're all made of aluminum. They have quick change steering wheels, and this steering wheel will come off. Them were the days. It's so much different than today's cars. It's an antique.
And the drivers who had to handle these beasts, they were some of the toughest in the nation.
There were 11 Barnwell children, plus Mama. They all came out on Saturday night. 3 of the boys, and they were tougher than rusty nails, drove, often against each other, often into each other.
Safety is something that was basically never practiced in the early days. You could drive in shorts if you wanted and flip-flops. There were no rules. And nobody ever had a fire suit. There were no fire suits. The only thing that was required was a helmet. You had to have a helmet of some sort. And a lot of those helmets were really suspect.
The first time I went to the races, I didn't even know how to work a stick shift. My friend had to unload my car for me. So what are you going to do when you go out to the racetrack? When we get to the track, I'll figure it out.
The cars get very hot inside, and after the race, you get out, you could barely breathe, and there's many nights, I mean, there's a bunch of people, you'd pour an ice water cooler on you just to try to cool off.
When racing first began, there were no things like air-conditioned suits, air-conditioned helmets, power steering.
I can say from personal experience that it was very physical. And passing, that wasn't easy.
There was always bumping and pushing. That's why they put bumpers on the cars. And actually, if someone didn't want you to pass, you could not pass them. They could take up a lane and a half. They could run into you if you were on the outside of them. So the only choice that you had was to stay behind them or to move them. And a lot of times you had to move them.
And I think you learn that by being moved out of the way a few times.
You can get away with murder as far as knocking people out and sticking them in the fence.
I wanted people to race me like I would race them. And if they didn't race me the way I thought they should, then I had to take steps to correct it.
If they give me an inch, I give them an inch. If they give me the bumper, then I'd give them the bumper the next time I got to them.
Nogi not in contention as Larry crosses the line. The checker is up and it is his.
I can remember different times when maybe I got abused by somebody and it might go 6 months to a year, and then all of a sudden it would be the perfect opportunity.
If you had a problem with him the week before, and now he's in your sights and you can get there, you knock him out.
Bobby Brack had the best philosophy later on that he told me. He said, you couldn't let those guys rough you up, because if they rough you up once, they do it every Saturday night. So you had to get even. And Bobby said, my philosophy was if somebody roughed me up, I would rough them up to get even, then I would rough them up one more time to get ahead.
It was all part of the day, and on some days, special events would entertain the fans. Demolition Derby was one of them.
It was one of those things that I did that after I got out, I said I would never do it again.
They fought hard with their cars, but it didn't end there.
Hialeah was known as a rough track. People from West Palm and from Naples would say, well, they're always getting in fights down there and cars are banging up one another. I said, that's what you do in stock car racing on a Saturday night in South Florida.
There were several different ways that you settled your differences. You might settle it on the track with your car against someone else's car, or you might settle it in the pit area, again with cars, which got a little bit hairy, or verbally, or with fists.
A lot of young people come into this sport now and they complain how, man, you guys are rough and you guys are this. They have no idea.
Somebody roughed you up and you had an intentional hit. A lot of these guys, they would retaliate. It wasn't like, oh, they're going to pits now, I'm going to cry boo-hoo. You know, you shouldn't have done that. Those guys settled it.
Personally, I don't think that I had to settle anything that way, but it could have happened that way. But
You mean you never had a fight?
I didn't say that.
When I buckle my seatbelt, I'm not as big as anybody on the racetrack. When you have to fight, if you want to be ugly, I'd tear your car up. And it's a matter of, you could punch me if you wanted to, but you had to rebuild your automobile, and that was too much work.
But all in all, later, I think we laughed about it.
I think it's the passion. You know, people go there not to ride around. I mean, we didn't go there just something to do on Saturday night. You went there with a specific purpose to win.
You raced hard, and then afterwards, you can say we played hard. But anyways, it was a great time for many, many years.
Believe it or not, when we were on a racetrack, we were ready to kill each other. I'm going to get this guy, I'm going to wreck him. But it was really a tight-knit family thing. I mean, the guy crashed one week, breaks something the next, and Hey, you need an axle? Here's one. You need a wheel? Here's one. It's one of them love-hate relationships.
There was this one particular brawl that I won't forget. I was actually just got done racing, got out of my car and was headed up to the concession stand to get my case of beer for winning the race. Well, about the time the lights went out and everybody was screaming and hollering and nobody knew what was going on. But come to find out, one driver had another problem with another driver on the racetrack and felt that the best way to get to him was to turn the lights off so he could get away with it. Nobody would know what happened. And it was a knockdown drag out. And when the lights came back on, it was like nothing ever happened.
That's what Hialeah was about more than anything. It was just a big family. And yeah, there was a lot of people that didn't get along there, but you don't always get along with everybody in your family.
Yeah, we used to laugh about it. That guy there, when I drove his car, I'd win the race. He would come out with a jumpsuit on. I looked like the owner, and he looked like the driver.
The fire crew had...
When you get around people and you get to talk about things, you remember all sorts of stuff. But overall, we had an awful lot of fun racing there. And after the races, we'd end up racing our trucks down the road with the race cars on them.
Just amazing how we all still get along, but yet some nights we would fight each other. But we've all learned to forget, and go on.
Yeah, the boys like to fight, but guess what? So did the wives and girlfriends. As it turns out, the Hialeah Speedway fan club was cliquier than a high school cafeteria.
The wives weren't allowed in the pits back then because they figured they was going to cause too much trouble.
Well, you're going to stand behind your man, no matter what, but yeah, it would get a little exciting at times.
Security would be called to the pits more for women than men. They would take it out on the racetrack. The women only had the pits.
Being born into a racing family, my earliest memories are of racing and hanging out with the crowds in the stands.
As a kid out there, I remember like all the wives would sit next to each other and you had like your different, setup with late model wives were here and Thundercar wives were there. And
just seeing the stands full was what really counted to me.
Everyone had their heroes. Being a driver at Hialeah Speedway was like being a rock star.
Larry Rogero, number 237, who is one of the more popular drivers out here this afternoon.
I think as a kid, growing up down there and you look in the stands, you were kind of enamored that people coming to watch me do what I do. You're all greasy, rolling around in the dirt out there.
I had a hero when I was a young boy, Harry Vernon. We went there on a Saturday night, and I think it's just a natural thing to kind of hero worship someone.
And you're looking at a guy that's larger than life, and you're like nervous to go up and talk to him. And yet, you come up to him, "Hi, Bobby," and he look at you, "Hey, how are you? That was a good race you drove." Well, thank you very much. And you'd ask him these stupid questions because you were nervous. He would take the time to sit and talk to you. And every Saturday night, he would come over and say hi to my grandfather and me and sit and talk to us. And I'm thinking, this guy is the champ.
Longtime Speedway photographer Bobby 5x5 Day was another kind of hero. He was nicknamed 5x5 because he was as wide as he was tall. But he didn't mind. He even printed it on the back of all his pictures.
He would shoot into the night. He'd stay around after the races and hobnob with the drivers and crews and the wives and the kids. Then he'd go home in the middle of the night and stay up all night to develop those pictures to have ready for the next day's racing at a different track or to give to the media or whatever he would do, and he just was very dedicated.
Today, Bobby's photos are included in some of the most impressive racing memorabilia collections around.
It was a wonderful world. It was like we were Alice in Wonderland. We had our own playground. We could go do what we wanted, have a good time, but all good things come to an end.
When I heard the track was going to officially close, it wasn't a surprise because the racing had deteriorated for, years.
The taxes on that property were very high and the Speedway couldn't afford to pay them, and there was always people chipping in, donating, and trying to help keep the place alive.
It got more difficult to get fans in the stands. The competition for the entertainment dollar was certainly a big factor.
We had tried all types of different things, dollar draft beers, dollar hamburgers, buy one, get one free. We tried everything we could scheme up, and it just less and less and less.
And today, that address is occupied by 2 big box stores.
Unfortunately, what happened to Hialeah Speedway was inevitable.
Closing night, August 13th, 2005. I couldn't bring myself to go. Hialeah Speedway had been a huge part of my life, for my whole life. And I needed to remember it as a living entity rather than seeing the lights go out for the last time.
When they handed me that trophy that night, it was just an unreal feeling. The place was packed. There was 7,000 people there. Herb Tillman was there. Herb Tillman pulls out the original trophy from the first night, and that's something you can't even script.
Reunions help everyone keep in touch.
If there was anything I could do to bring it back, I would do it.
I feel very fortunate that in the time frame that I was at Hialeah, late 60s through the 70s, to me was the most fun time anywhere in racing.
I would say it was probably the biggest thing in my life, racing was. I probably should have chased it a little bit harder, but you know, it was tough.
Ladies and gentlemen, that concludes our show. But always remember, please, do your speeding at the Speedway and not on the highway. Good night, y'all.
And that's how we ended every Saturday night at Hialeah Speedway. Good night, y'all.